Live on YouTube. So we have a multicast. We have 2 video streams and an audio feed, all happening simultaneously. Okay, let's get rolling. All right, folks, welcome to the very first ever Maamar Mondays. So if you thought Monday Night Football was awesome, just wait till you get Maamar Monday action. Okay. So we are starting a discourse that was originally taught in the year 1940. The discourse, this is it right here. The discourse is from 1940. This was penned by the previous Chabad Lubavitch Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson, shortly after he came to the United States of America, again in the spring of 1940. He moved to New York, moved to Crown Heights, and that's where the Chabad Lubavitch movement took its roots in the United States of America. And this discourse is all about the festival of Passover. It's all about the month of Nisan, which is the upcoming Jewish month that starts on Thursday. Thursday is Rosh Chodesh, the first of the month. It's all about the spiritual energy behind the month and the holiday, and that's what we're going to explore. So the way we're going to do this is I actually have a copy of the text on my computer, and what I'm going to do is I'll share my screen with you, and then you'll be able to follow along. You can see, you'll be able to check you'll be able to follow along as we read the text, as we do some explanations. But I'll keep the text up. You can see, I think you'll be able to see my video, whatever. You'll be able to see me in the corner, but the main thing that we're going to focus on is the text. Okay, I'm going to share the screen, and here we go. Okay, can you guys see that? Yeah. It may take a second to load up. Okay, you got it? All right. Hey, Sandrine. Welcome. Okay. All right, so let's jump right in. Again, this is a discourse from 1940. If you have any questions at any point, feel free to ask. If you feel like it's going to be, it's a little bit noisy by you, it sounds pretty quiet so far, but if you feel like it might be a little bit noisy, feel free to mute your microphone. You can always unmute it at your leisure, ask questions. It's meant to be a discussion and dialogue. Okay, I'm going to read it in English because that is the native language of most of us here, so we'll read it in English, and I'll give some explanations about it. This discourse opens up with the verse that contains the very first commandment to the Jewish people while still in Egypt. So while still in Egypt, God is speaking to Moses. Of course, we know that God speaks to Moses about the plagues and about, let my people go, all that stuff. And here now, toward the end of the plague journey, right before the 10th plague is about to hit, God tells Moses, I have another mitzvah for you. And the mitzvah is going to be the mitzvah of Rosh Chodesh, the mitzvah of the Jewish calendar, essentially. And in this mitzvah, God, that this Wednesday night, Thursday, this month is the first of the months of the year, which is going to be a big piece of this discussion. So let's jump right in. I'm actually going to make the page a little bit bigger, make the text a little bit bigger so it's easier to read. Okay, it begins with the assistance of heaven. It's always a good way to start. We certainly need God's assistance. Shabbat Parshat Tazria, Parshat HaChodesh, 5700, the year 1940. Parshat HaChodesh was the Shabbat that we just experienced is known as Shabbat HaChodesh, where we read Parshat HaChodesh, which is the section that talks about the upcoming month of Nisan. Now it happens to be that this year, because of what's going on, many synagogues have been closed, including ours here in Atlanta, and we didn't have the opportunity to read this reading in public. I imagine that somewhere around the world there were synagogues that were open in places that maybe haven't been affected yet by or haven't been affected by coronavirus, and I think it's so I'm sure that there were places that read this, but this is just so you know, this is basically, this discourse is essentially 80 years, almost to the day. This is about 80 years to the day of when this was originally authored. Okay, so let's jump right in. The discourse opens after that header with the verse from the book of Exodus. And it says, this month is for you the first of months. It is for you the first of the months of the year. And it's referring to the month of Nisan, the month, again, that Passover is in. So it calls it two things. There's two halves of the verse. The first half of the verse says that this month is the first of months. And the second half of the verse says, it is for you the first of the months of the year. Now, what jumps out immediately at us is that the verse seems to be repetitive. It calls this month the first of months, and then it says it's the first of the months of the year. Sounds like it's saying the same thing twice, which is exactly what the author, the previous Rabbi, what he points out, and he asks this question. The second half of the verse, it is for you the first of the months of the year, seems to be a restatement of the first half, i.e., this month is for you the first of months. So why does the Torah repeat itself? This is question number one. In every Chasidic text, many mystical texts begin with a verse and questions on the verse. It's kind of like the passport with which we enter into a deeper conversation about a topic. Here too, we have an opening verse and many questions that we might ask. So the first question is, why the repetition? It says twice in the verse that it's the first of the months of the year. We get it. Tell it to me once, and that's it. Let's continue in this paragraph. Additionally, why is the verse so verbose? It is for you the first of the months of the year. It would have been sufficient had the verse just said, it is the first of the months of the year. This is referring to the second half of the verse. So if for whatever reason the Torah needed to repeat itself and call the month of Nisan the first of the months, and then again tell us that it's the first of the months of the year, okay, that's question number one, why the repetition? But even if we found a reason why it needed to be repeated, there's a second question, and that is, why does, and I'm going to highlight it here on the text, I hope you can see it, why does it add in the verse, on the top line over there, why does it say it is for you the first of the months of the year? Why for you? For you implies for you, the Jewish people. Why is it for you the first of the months of the year? If you're telling me that this month is the first of the months, or the first of the months of the year, wonderful, mazel tov. So now we know which is, when we buy the Jewish calendar, which month should go first. Why does it add in the words for you, or in the Hebrew, the word lachem? It's one word in Hebrew, two words in English. Why this repetition? Okay, so let's continue now, third paragraph. From all of this, it is understood that there are two dynamics here. Number one, first of the months, and number two, months of the year. So again, we have two dynamics. That the month of Nisan is the first of months, and it's also the first of the months of the year. Two different things. And although this month is for you the first of months, which is the first point, nevertheless, it is for you the first of the months of the year. In other words, both dynamics are necessary, first of months and months of the year, as we shall explain. At this point, if you have this is the key to understanding the entire discourse, the entire lesson, the entire essence of this month. It's all contained in this one verse. And the truth is, he's already provided in this paragraph that I'm about to highlight right here. This paragraph that I just highlighted is the key to the entire discourse. We have two dynamics, the first of months and first of the months of the year, two different dynamics. And the point that the verse is teaching us, that it's not telling us that the month is both things as an obvious thing. No, it's telling us that it's the first of months. And then it's telling us something novel, and that is, even though it's the first of the months, it's still the first of the months of the year. Now, if you don't have the mystical explanation, that makes no sense. What I just said and what's written here. In other words, what does it mean? That even though it's the first of the months, it's still the first of the months of the year. It's saying the same thing. But when you understand that there are two dynamics, and these dynamics are not just different, but they're opposing, then we can reread the verse, and then we can understand how what the Torah is teaching us is that this month, actually has both dynamics, a paradoxical energy that contains both the energy of the first of months and the energy of the months of the year, and those are two different things, but still they're both contained in this month. Now again, we haven't explained any of this and what it means. Certainly not what it means practically, but that's what we're going to do over the next 45 minutes or so, and over the next few Mondays that we're going to be studying this discourse together. But this is so far kind of a structural approach to building out where we're going with this. In other words, we're going to analyze this month, the month of Nisan, the month of Passover, and we're going to explain that there are two dynamics in general in the universe, first of months and months of the year. And then we're going to see how both of these elements are reflected and expressed in the month of Nisan. Make sense so far? Sort of? Yes? Okay. Let's continue. All right, we're up to the section that says dual beginnings. The explanation is as follows. Midrash Rabbah. Now, Midrash Rabbah is one of the midrashic sources on Torah. So Midrash Rabbah states, when God chose his world, he established in it first of months and years. And when he chose Jacob and his sons, he established in it a first month of redemption. And now we get our first deeper clue as to what all of the above was talking about. The Midrash tells us that there are two beginnings, or two firsts. There's the first of creation and the first of redemption. So again, the Midrash says when God chose his world, that means when God created the world. So God created within the world the first of months and years. We know that as Rosh Hashanah. So when you buy your Jewish calendar, you pick it up at the local supermarket, right? You get your Jewish calendar for the year. It always begins kind of around September time. Why? Because that is the Jewish month of Tishrei, the month in which is Rosh Hashanah, the new year. It says, when God chose Jacob and his sons, in other words, the Jewish people at the time of the first of the month of creation, which is Tishrei, and the first month of redemption, which is the month of Nisan. Two different firsts. And by the way, you should know on a very basic level, these are 6 months apart. So Tishrei and Nisan are basically 6 months apart. Tishrei is Rosh Hashanah, Nisan is Passover, and so what he's saying is, within the count of creation, within the construct of creation, Tishrei is first. Within the context of redemption, the month of Nisan is first. Let's continue inside. Bottom paragraph on this page. This then is the explanation of our verse. This month is for you the first of months. It is for you the first of the months of the year. Okay, let's continue. See where he's going with this. Okay, here we go. Months of the year refer to when God chose his world. Okay, so that is the second half of the verse. It's referring to creation. This month is for you the first of months, which is the first half of the verse, refers to when God chose Jacob and his sons and established for them a month of redemption, the month of Nisan. So the two halves of the verse are basically saying that this month is the first of months, i.e. it's the first month of redemption, and it is for you also the first of the months of the year. It's also, at this point, the first of the months of creation as well. Even though we don't celebrate Rosh Hashanah in this month, nonetheless, it's the first of the months of creation. Again, a theme that we're going to explain as this continues to roll out. This, however, so let's continue inside. This, however, needs to be understood. For our sages said, on Rosh Hashanah, slave labor ceased from our forefathers, which seems to imply that the beginning of the redemption in Egypt took place on Rosh Hashanah. Why then is it Nisan that is referred to as the month God established when he chose Jacob and his sons as the month of redemption? And now we ask another question. It would seem that the Exodus, although the Exodus happened in this month of Nisan, but slave labor ceased from our forefathers. They stopped working already on Rosh Hashanah the 6 months prior. So to explain, at a certain point in the timeline of the 10 plagues, the hold of the Egyptians on the Jewish people broke. you kind of, if you think about it, at what point were the Jews still building the buildings, right? I mean, were they building it through all the plagues, the plague of darkness? Were they still schlepping bricks? Were they still building buildings? They weren't. At a certain point in time, because of the plagues and because of all of the doom and gloom that was coming on the Egyptians, at a certain point, the Jews stopped stopped the slave labor. And that happened, according to our sages, on Rosh Hashanah. So now the question is, if it stopped on Rosh Hashanah, then why isn't that considered to be the month of redemption? Why is it only when the Jews physically walked out of Egypt? Now, I guess you could say, well, as long as you're still stuck in Egypt, so it's still not a full redemption, and that's true, but nonetheless, it seems to be an interesting duality or an interesting kind of connection or some sort of synchronicity between Rosh Hashanah being the time when the slave labor stopped and Passover when they actually stepped out of Egypt, but they're in these same two different months, the month of Tishrei, the month of Nisan. So what's really going on here? What is behind all of this this calendar business? Okay, any questions so far? Questions? Comments? No? Okay. The beginning is very technical. Again, all of this is to get us into the conversation. We're about to launch into some themes. But we're getting into, this is kind of like the opening technical part of it. Okay, let's continue in the section called Nisan and Tishrei. Again, these are the 2 months that we're focusing on. Nisan and Tishrei are referred to in the Torah as 1st and 7th. So consistently throughout the 5 books of Moses, it refers to the month of Nisan, the month of Passover, as the 1st month, and Tishrei, the month of Rosh Hashanah, as the 7th month, which again, if you get your Jewish calendar, you know that the 1st month right there is Tishrei, is Rosh Hashanah. Nonetheless, in the Torah, it has a different count. It calls Nisan the 1st month and Tishrei the 7th month. Nisan is called 1st and Tishrei 7th. Let's continue back inside. The redemption from Egypt, which was the first redemption, took place in Nisan. However, last paragraph here, however, with regard to the last redemption, which will commence with the coming of Mashiach speedily in our days, and let us say, Amen, right? So the final redemption, the messianic redemption, regarding this redemption, the Talmud records a dispute between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yehoshua. Rabbi Eliezer maintains that our forefathers were redeemed in Nisan, and in the future we will be redeemed in Tishrei. So Rabbi Eliezer says, let me jump in for a second. Rabbi Eliezer says that the exodus from Egypt, the story of Passover, happens in the month of Nisan. But Mashiach is going to come in the month of Tishrei, the month of Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot. That's the month in which Mashiach is going to come. That's one opinion. The next opinion, Rabbi Yehoshua maintains that our forefathers were redeemed in Nisan, and in the future we will be redeemed in Nisan as well. So Rabbi Yehoshua maintains that no, Passover happens in Nisan, and Mashiach is going to come in the same month, the month of Nisan. By the way, this reminds me of, it's kind of like sports talk radio, which I don't know if that's around at this point because of everything's canceled, but where there's a big dispute, a big argument over what's going to happen. It's like, well, I think this is going to, it hasn't happened yet, but here in the Talmud we have Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yehoshua, that there's a dispute about when is Mashiach going to come, which month is it going to happen in. Is it going to be a Tishrei redemption or a Nisan redemption? So 2 opinions. The previous Rabbi asked the question right here. This requires clarification. What exactly is at the root of their argument regarding the time of the future redemption, which will take place speedily in our days, Amen, whether it will be a Nisan or Tishrei? In other words, what's the argument hinging on? What, they had a preference of a month? One guy liked eating apples dipped in honey in Rosh Hashanah, the other guy liked matzo ball soup on Passover, and so they wanted Mashiach to come in their favorite holiday month. What's at the core, what's at the root of this dispute? In other words, why is it that Rabbi Eliezer maintains that although Passover happens in Nisan, Mashiach is going to come in Tishrei? And why does Rabbi Yehoshua maintain that both will take place, well, one has and one will take place in the month of Nisan? What is behind the argument? They're not just arguing for the sake of arguing. There must be something behind it. What is that? In addition, back inside, why is it that the Midrash Rabbah sides with, it's a Midrashic text, sides with the view of Rabbi Yeshua that our forefathers were redeemed in Nisan and in the future we will be redeemed in Nisan? Why is it that the Midrash decides to step in and actually side in accordance with one of the two opinions, and it says, you should know Rabbi Yeshua is right. It's going to happen in Nisan. Why is it that it's, when it comes to halacha, when it comes to Jewish law, when there's a dispute about Jewish law, so you need a halacha. You need to know if it's kosher or not kosher. So when you have a dispute, you have to take a vote and go with the majority and then rule and act in accordance with that way. But what's the actionable item over here? What are we doing? So a theory, that's the psak, that's the halacha, that's the ruling. What do they base it on? First month of creation and the first month of redemption. We have a question about the future redemption, if it's going to happen in Tishrei or if it's going to happen in Nisan. Many questions, 3 or 4 questions so far. Let's continue. We're going to get more questions. Then and now. That's the section that we're up to. In connection, let me scroll up a little bit. Okay. Then and now. In connection with the dedication of the first temple, the verse states, this is coming from the book of Kings, all Israel assembled before King Solomon in the month of Etanim, which is the 7th month for the holiday of Sukkot. This is the dedication of the first holy temple. This is going back about 2,500 years. It says the entire Jewish people gathered in Jerusalem before King Solomon, Shlomo HaMelech. They gathered when? In the month of Etanim. That's what it's called. And then the verse continues. Which month is this? It's the 7th month. And why did they gather? For the holiday of Sukkot. So now we know that the 7th month is when the holiday of Sukkot falls out, which is the same month as Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah, which is Tishrei. And again, here it's referred to as the 7th month. Targum Yonatan, let's continue inside. Targum Yonatan, which is one of the original translations of biblical text. Targum Yonatan interprets the verse as follows: all Israel assembled before King Solomon in the month. When it says the month of Etanim, Etan can also mean old or ancient. So here's how the Targum Yonatan interprets the verse. All Israel, again right over here, all Israel assembled before King Solomon in the month that the ancient ones, the Etanim, the ancient ones, used to call the first month, and which is now the 7th month for the holiday of Sukkot. In other words, continue inside, in other words, ancient ones, prior to the giving of the Torah, called Tishrei the first month. Now we have another idea. Not only does the Torah call Nisan the first month and Tishrei the 7th month, but Tishrei the 7th month, according to Scripture, according to the book of Kings and the Targum Yonatan, used to be called the first month. So now we have a conspiracy almost. Tishrei used to be called first month. Now it's called the 7th month. So what happened? The implication is we have a question. So what happened to change the first month? It used to be Tishrei. Now it's the 7th month. Nisan has become the first month. What happened? At this point, you should know the answer. What happened? What happened is we had the Exodus. But we're going to explore that process and what exactly it means and what exactly it does about the fact that there is this Exodus. How does it change stuff? How does it affect the count of the year? Let's continue inside. For you sleeping? All right, here we go. For as the Midrash says, the world was created on the 25th of Elul. Right? The month of Tishrei, the first day of creation, day number 1 is the 25th day of Elul. The month of Tishrei is therefore the first month of the year for years, as it says, and they, the heavenly host, shall be as a sign, shall be as signs and testaments for days and for years. And the first of Tishrei is Rosh Hashanah. So we know that creation happens, the first day of creation is the 25th of Elul. The first day of humankind, the sixth day of creation, is the first of Tishrei. That's why Tishrei was originally known as the first month for years. As the verse says that there are days and years, and as we have valid segments, Torah itself says there's a segment of 24 hours and a segment of years. And the segment of days, we know how that figures. We know how, it was evening, it was morning. That's one day. That's how a day works in Judaism. And how does a year work? A year also works from the beginning of creation. That's the first, and then you go around till the anniversary of that, which is which completes the whole year. So it would seem, it makes a lot of sense, therefore, that Tishrei is called the first month because it's literally the month of creation of Adam and Eve. Let's continue. Our sages thus said, top of 34, in accordance with which view do we now pray on Rosh Hashanah with the words, this is the day, the beginning of your creation, a remembrance of the first day. On Rosh Hashanah in our prayers, in our liturgy, we call it a remembrance of the first day. We literally call Rosh Hashanah a throwback to day one, i.e. day one of Adam and Eve. In other words, let's go back inside. In other words, Rosh Hashanah, which takes place on the first of Tishrei, is the beginning of your creation each year, since it is a remembrance of the first day that creation was completed with the creation of Adam. So getting back to our sages' statement, in accordance with which view was this prayer composed? With the view of Rabbi Eliezer, from our sages, reminding us that creation, which began on the 25th day of Elul, culminates with the creation of Adam and Eve on the first of Tishrei. And that first of Tishrei is now the beginning of your creation and a remembrance of the first day. So now we know why in ancient times Tishrei was month number one, because it's the first month of creation, the first day really, the first of Tishrei, that Adam and Eve arrive on the scene. Let's continue. And which is now the seventh month, because nowadays the Torah calls it the seventh month. After the Exodus and the giving of the Torah, Tishrei is the seventh month, as Nisan is the first month. And here we have the big question. Here we go. But if Tishrei was originally called the first month, what changed that caused Nisan to be called the first? And if the cause is the redemption that took place in Nisan, i.e. the Exodus, that itself requires explanation. Why did the redemption take place in Nisan? The beginning of the redemption took place in Tishrei, as it was on Rosh Hashanah, which is in Tishrei, that slave labor ceased from our forefathers. So why did the complete redemption take place in Nisan? It sounds like we're asking a question on a story, a kasha afamaisa, a question on a story. You're asking why the Exodus happened then? Because it happened then. But we're asking on a mystical level, on a deeper level. Nothing happens by chance. And there's energy. Every month has its own energy. And so really what we're asking is, what is the energy of Tishrei? What is the energy of Nisan? What is the energy of creation? What is the energy of redemption? Why was Tishrei the first month of the year originally? Why is Nisan now the first month of the year? Why do our calendars still begin with Tishrei? And the Jewish calendar year does change in Tishrei, Rosh Hashanah. How do we reconcile that? That's not even a question in our discourse. That's my own question that we'll explore in this exploration together as well. And what does it all mean for you and I? Again, the title of this book, if you could see it on your screen, is called Creation and Redemption. We're looking at these two themes. What is the theme of creation, Tishrei, and what is the theme of redemption? How do they work together? How do they work separate from each other, etc.? Any questions? All of this is the opening chapter. Again, very technical, right? Because we're focusing on a verse and really splitting it apart and asking a half a dozen questions on just one verse of Torah. So it's a bit technical, but I want to check in now with everybody, make sure that you guys, we're all on the same page. Any questions?
Yeah, I missed, Sandrine, I missed the beginning. Who wrote that Maamar?
Yeah, this Maamar is authored by the previous Chabad Lubavitch Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson. He authored it shortly after arriving in the United States in 1940. So shortly after arriving in New York in 1940, this is, I think, the third discourse that was authored by the previous Rebbe on the shores of America once he moved here. I believe the first discourse was a Purim discourse, Balayla Hahu, a Purim discourse in 1940, and then I think there was another one in between, and then we have this one all about Passover and the month of Nisan. So again, if we wanted to summarize chapter 1, we would say that it's clear from the verse in Exodus regarding this month of Nisan that Nisan is a complicated month filled with interesting energy, and the question is, what is it all about? It's the first month, it's the first of the months of the year, it's taking over from Tishrei, that used to be 1, now this is number 1, that's 7. We have a lot of questions hanging in the air. And we can kind of keep them on the side for a moment, because right now we're going to jump into a completely.
Rabbi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Hey, Karen.
Oh, hey. So I have a question. So I know in Torah that it is always Nisan that's the first month of the year.
Yes.
I'm trying to remember at what point, which is the first, the first observance, right? The first actual commandment to observe is Pesach, right? In Torah, that's the first one that we are commanded to observe.
The first holiday, you mean?
Yeah, the first holiday.
Yeah, we don't really have holidays until we get the Torah, and we became a nation to get the Torah at Passover. So that's when really we start getting into counts and numbers, and which is the first month and which is the 7th month. But yeah, I mean, in Torah, throughout the Torah narrative, I actually worked on publishing this text that we're reading right now, on the translation and the annotation. So I wrote here in this footnote. Hold on, I'll just pull up the footnote. Let's see. Hold on, give me a second. Stay with me. Okay, take a look here. Maybe it's too big.
Footnote 10.
Footnote 10. Nisan is referred to as the first month in Exodus 12:2, Leviticus 23:5, Numbers 28:16. Tishrei is referred to as the 7th month in Leviticus 23:24, verse 27, verse 34, Numbers 29:1, 7, 12. There's countless times, not countless, you see the instances here, several instances where Torah refers to Nisan as month number 1 and Tishrei is month number 7. Look, I mentioned this a few times. When you Rosh Hashanah, we know, is Tishrei, and for most of us, we call that the New Year, right? Happy New Year is Rosh Hashanah. And it makes sense that if you're changing the calendar year from, let's say, 5779 to 5780, you would think that's the first month of the year. What the Torah tells us is, no. You may change the year then, but that's not the first of the months of the year. Are you with me?
Yeah, but it makes sense that if that's really the birth, that's when we became prepared for redemption.
Right.
It's the birth of the Jewish people, then that makes sense. But if we are counting according to the creation of the world, and let's face it, calendars are constructs for man, not for God, because God doesn't need a calendar per se.
Are you saying God uses a BlackBerry?
I'm just saying that
Palm Pilot?
Time is relative,
right.
in this physical world, and and as we all know, you go outside of this physical realm, you can actually speed and slow up time based on the speed at which you travel. If you travel at light speed, you are totally altering time anyway. So isn't this I mean, isn't there this spiritual symbolism of the birth of the Jewish people and our readiness, for
Absolutely.
redemption?
Absolutely. So on one hand, you can say that, look, why is Nisan the first month? It's because it's the first month of the Jewish people's birth as a nation. But what we're going to do in our discourse is, and that's correct, that's true. But in this discourse, we're going to go even deeper to explore the dueling dynamics of creation and redemption on an energy level. In other words, and I'm going to give you just a little bit more information here, on a flow of energy, a default energy that flows into the world from the moment it was created. And then there's another form of energy that flows into the world by the Exodus. And that's what we're going to explore now. What energy is there in creation? What energy is there in redemption, i.e., Tishrei, creation, Nisan, redemption, and therefore, based on understanding these two dynamics, which are very different, what does it mean for us, and why is this now the first, and what does it mean it's the first for you? What does that mean? By the end of this, in another few weeks, we're gonna walk away. I'm like itching to give to give you the insight, but we're gonna go through the process here. At the end of it, you and I, we're all gonna be blown away by such a practical, powerful, insight that you can take with you and uplift and inspire you as we go about our day-to-day lives. It's so brilliant. But we got to follow the process. But at the core, what you're saying is correct. In other words, creation happens and everyone exists, and then something monumental happens in the lifespan, if you will, or in the history of the Jewish people, i.e., their very birth. And now that becomes the first month because now we're here as a nation. That's absolutely correct. We're going to explore this from a mystical perspective as well. Make sense? Okay, okay, awesome. Any other questions so far? I like questions, by the way. Don't hold back on asking questions. Yes, no? No questions?
One other.
Yeah.
And that is going back to, I don't want to get too stuck in that area, but when the argument had to do about King Solomon, I got a little lost in that with, as far as the ancients and
Yeah.
Just wondering if you can give a
I'm going to give you the clip notes. You ready? Who reads the book anyway? I mean, come on. Clip notes are the way to go. Or Sparks notes or something, whatever the kids call it today.
That's right.
Yeah, who knows? It's been a while since I read To Kill a Mockingbird. It used to be that you could read the book or read the clip notes or watch the movie. Now, no one watches even the movie. Now you just watch the 2-minute trailer and you're good to go.
That's true.
No, you don't have to watch the trailer. You just watch the meme. I mean, seriously. Okay. Okay, fine. I'm getting distracted by thinking of memes. Okay, let me give you a quick synopsis of that verse from Kings. Okay, the context is talking about the dedication of the first temple, and it talks about the setting. Like, when did it take place? When were the Jews gathered for the celebration to celebrate the dedication of the first temple? And the answer is, it was during the holiday of Sukkot. All the people were gathered, and that's when they officially opened the new temple in Jerusalem in whatever year it was, about 2,500 years ago. So, that's when it happened. But the scripture itself refers to that month as the month of Etanim. Yerech ha'Etanim, the month of Etanim. So what does Etanim mean? What kind of month is that? There's no month called Etanim. So so here we go. So the Targum Yonatan explains Etanim is not the name of a month, but Etanim means ancient ones. And what the scripture is telling us is that this month is the month that the ancient ones used to call month number 1, but today we call it 7 because Nisan took number 1. In other words, Tishrei, the month of Sukkot, right? Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, that used to be month number 1, but ever since the Exodus and the giving of the Torah, it's lost its status. It's no longer number 1. It's slipped now to number 7. That's it. That's all we're saying. In other words, what it's saying is that although you and I open up the Torah, like the footnote that I showed you before, and it clearly says time after time after time that Nisan is month 1 and Tishrei is month 7, it wasn't always like that. There was a time when Tishrei was, even in Torah thought, if you will, it was number 1, but it lost that status. Its ranking slipped to number 7. It used to be number 1 in the world. You imagine what a drop, right? Imagine you're a tennis player ranked number 1, right? Can you imagine the promotional deals? Can you imagine the sneakers? Can you imagine the apparel? Okay, moving along. All right, let's go. Here we go. Let's do chapter 2. And by the way, we're going to ask more questions. We're going to ask more questions before we get to some solid answers. Here we go. Chapter 2. The explanation of the matter is as follows. It is written, opening of the 10 Commandments, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt. And the previous Rabbi asks, this needs to be understood. Why does God mention the exodus from Egypt and not the creation of heaven and earth, which was a much greater miracle than the exodus? Okay, commandment number 1, God says, I am the Lord your God, right? I'm the Lord. Now, by the way, I'm not saying this. I'm just quoting the Torah here. So don't get this twisted, right? So God says, I am the Lord your God. How does he introduce himself? Like, hi, my name is God. What does God do? What did God do? What's on his resume? What does God say at the 10 Commandments? Yeah, at Sinai, what does God say? What's God's resume? I brought you out of the land of Egypt. So the previous Rabbi asks, why does God pull out from his resume the Exodus? He should pull out from his resume creation. Isn't creation of heaven and earth a greater accomplishment than the Exodus? Yes? You with me on the question? Yes? If God is trying to introduce himself with his greatest accomplishment, you would think he would say, hi, I'm God who created all this out of nothing, as opposed to, I'm God who took the Jewish people out of Egypt. The former seems to be a greater accomplishment. And here he jumps. Sorry? No, okay. And here he jumps into explaining the question in even more depth. The miracles that occurred with the Exodus from Egypt involved, I'm going to add a word, only the manipulation of something from something. For example, the staff that turned into a snake, and the water that turned to blood, and likewise at the splitting of the sea, where the water stood erect like a wall. All these miracles were the manipulation of something from something. In other words, you had a thing, and then it changed into another thing. So, for example, you had the Nile River of water that changes into blood. That's a miracle. But it's not something from nothing, right? You didn't start off with nothing and then get blood. You had water. So it's a miracle of something from something. You started off with something and you made it into something else. But you started off with something. You had something in your toolbox. That's called in the Hebrew, yesh miyesh. Something from something. It's very different than the creation of heaven and earth, which is totally different, as he says here in the next paragraph, which I'm going to highlight right here. Okay? But the creation of heaven and earth is a creation of something from. It would therefore seem.
Somebody named Stephen Howard.
Hold on one second. So it would therefore. Let me continue inside. It would therefore seem that God should have said, I am the Lord who created heaven and earth. Again, if God is trying to tout his most remarkable accomplishment, he should have said, I am the Lord who created all of this, the entire universe and everything in it, out of abject nothingness. There was nothing, then there was something. That's an accomplishment. That God says, I took water and changed it to blood, seems to pale in comparison. Pale in comparison to creation of heaven and earth. And let's continue with a discussion about the nature of miracles. Now, the truth is, back inside, paragraph that I just highlighted, second to last paragraph on this page. The truth is that when we apply the expression of something from something to the miracles of Egypt, we mean that the something turned into another something, one with a different nature. So it's not just a standard something from something that makes sense. It's a miraculous something from something. To explain, we're not back inside yet. This is still me explaining. There's two types of something from somethings. I could take a piece of wood and make a chair and turn it into a chair or a table, right? So I take wood and I cut the wood into the shape that I need, or I cut the pieces, and then I glue them together, or I screw them together, whatever it is. I assemble the chair, the furniture. And so now I've taken a big log, a piece of wood, and I've turned it into a piece of furniture. That's something from something. That's not a miracle. That's manufacturing. That's not a miracle. It may take work and ingenuity. You know, if you're involved with IKEA, then you have to figure out how to do all of that and pack it into a box that fits under a door. You know, into a small envelope. You know that IKEA. I mean, before all this craziness, IKEA was opening up restaurants. You guys heard about this? IKEA's restaurants? Yes, no?
No.
Yeah, legit. Yeah. The interesting thing about the IKEA's restaurants is that you would have to make your own food. That was a joke. Now, it works so much better when we're all together, because then I can really sense the lack of laughter. Here I have to imagine that you guys are not laughing. So, all right, fine. Anyway, moving along. So what we have here is something from something that makes sense. You take a piece of wood and turn it into a piece of furniture. Or another example, you take Bob Ross. I love Bob Ross, as you guys know. So you have a palette, I think, a palette with paint, and you take your brush and you make happy trees. Happy trees, happy trees, happy trees, happy trees. Right? Happy trees. Dot the landscape. Right? That's creation, sort of. That's something from something, and it makes sense. You took paint and you made it into a painting. Makes sense. You take clay and you make it into pottery. All of this makes sense. Yeah. And what happens if you take a lot of clay and you make it into a very big pottery thing with animals? You call it Pottery Barn. Oh, man, I'm going to have to get used to this. All right, fine. Oh, there you go. Thank you, Julie. Thank you. I see the emoji. Yes, those are expressions. Yes, thank you.
Oh, it's Sylvie. I don't know how to do that.
Oh, thank you. Look at that even better. Sylvie, thank you, Sylvie. See that? The young will teach us how to navigate these new platforms. Okay.
She needs to moderate or facilitate this. This intergenerational divide is very fascinating.
Oh, this is fantastic. No, this is great. This is Americana. Okay, so you have different levels of miracles. When we talk about miracles, taking wood and turning it into a chair is not a miracle. But taking water and turning it into blood, that's a miracle. Why? Because water is not blood. Water's water and blood's blood. So even though it's not something from nothing, it's close. It's close. Because the blood never existed. Or the blood didn't exist in the space of the water. Again, so we have two categories of development. Something from something and something from nothing. Something from nothing is certainly a miracle, because you had nothing and now you have something, and where did it come from? Nowhere. So that's a miracle. Poof. But something from something is typically not considered to be a miracle. Why? Because you had something before and now you have a new thing, but it's just a derivative of the old thing. But what happens if your prior something is not at all like the new something? In other words, before you had water and now you have blood. Before you have a staff and now it's a snake. Go explain. So that's a something from something that's almost as miraculous as something from nothing. So let's get back. I want to do this paragraph again. The truth is that when we apply the expression something from something to the miracles of the Exodus, we mean that the something turned into another something, one, here's the key word, key phrase, one with a different nature. Let's go. This is certainly so. Whoa. Okay, here we go. Last paragraph here. I went too fast on my scrolling. This is certainly so in the case of the staff that turned into a snake. In this case, the staff did not just turn into a different entity, it turned into a completely different category of being. At first, continuing inside, it was either mineral or vegetable. I should have asked this as a question. All right, I'm asking it now as a question. What was Moses' staff made out of? What was it made out of? Moses' staff, right? The staff that he used to, he was holding a staff in his hands and he used it for the plagues and he used it to split the sea, all that stuff. What was it made out of? What was the material? Huh?
Was it acacia wood? Acacia wood?
So there's a dispute. Some say it was made out of vegetation, i.e. it was made out of wood. And some say it was made out of stone, mineral. Some say it was mineral, and some say it was vegetable. Not vegetable like a carrot, but like a vegetation. Depending, let's continue, on the two opinions regarding the staff, whether it was made of stone or wood. And if you look in the footnotes, footnote 33 here is coming from Shemot Rabbah, the Midrash. And the Midrash says, let's see, here we go. Rabbi Yehuda said, I'm highlighting it at the bottom of the page. The staff weighed 40 sah and was made of sapphire. Look at that. It's a sapphire staff. And look at the end of that footnote 33. This teaches us that the staff was made of something very strong that would split the rock. Remember when Moses hit the rock and it produced water, it split the rock? Yeah, if you have a sapphire staff, that can pull that off. It's a strong staff. So that's one opinion. But there's another opinion. This is footnote 34. This is Bamidbar Rabbah, another midrash that says that, here we go, the staff of Aaron, which sprouted almonds during Korach's revolt, shared the same staff, and therefore the staff that blossomed almonds, and Aaron's staff that blossomed almonds was really Moses' staff. And the idea is that staff was a staff made out of a natural material, not out of sapphire. So again, in the Midrash, we have two opinions about the nature of the composition, really. Whoops, it's too big. The composition of Moses' staff, whether it was made of stone or wood. Okay, let's continue inside. I'm going to highlight where we're up to, right after the M dash. Here we go, and when. And when it turned into a snake, it entered an entirely different category of being, that of an animal, and acquired a different nature, that of its new category. So what he says here is that although it's not something from nothing, it's not like God produced a snake out of nowhere, the snake came from a staff, but since when do staffs turn into snakes? A staff is not a snake. So vis-a-vis a snake, it's something from nothing. Are you with me on this? In other words, relative to its new identity, there was nothing before it that would have precipitated its new identity. It's not like wood that turns into a chair, or paint that turns into a painting, or pottery that turns into clay that turns into pottery. This is a staff made of wood or sapphire that's turning into a live creature, live animal. That's not normal. That's not a thing. That's not usual. It's not just a transformation of one form to another form. It's an entirely new creation almost something from nothing. Almost something from nothing. We'll see by the end of this chapter why it's not exactly something from nothing, why creation of heaven and earth is still greater than these miracles. Let's continue inside. In other words, what he's doing right now is elevating the stature, elevating the status of the the miracles of the Exodus. That we should realize how amazing they were. Okay, next paragraph. The above is true even in the case of the water that turned to blood. Although the transformation took place within the same category of being, water and blood are both inanimate forms of existence. Nevertheless, water and blood are two opposite types of beings with opposite natures. In Kabbalah, water symbolizes chesed, kindness, while blood symbolizes gevura, severity. They are also opposite in function. Water is not blood and blood is not water. So although they're both liquid, but it's still, to produce blood from water is not a normal thing. It's not a usual thing. It's not a normative progression to go from one to the other. Oh, I had blood and then I had water. That's not how it works. Blood and water are very different. He says that water is chesed. Water symbolizes kindness, giving, generosity, love. Water is symbolic of love and giving. And blood symbolizes severity. When a person gets angry, they have a red face. Why a red face? It means the blood is rushing to their head, right? They're getting passionate. Red is a sign of passion, and passion and intensity is gevura. Chesed is easygoing, it's flowing, it's watery, like water flows, it's serene, it's calm, it's all good, it's all love, it's peace. Oseh shalom bimramav cha cha cha. Hey, we need peace. Gevura is blood. Although they're both liquids, they're opposites in nature. So to go from water to blood is a miracle. And this is true back inside. And this is true even in the case of the splitting of the sea, where the water stood like a wall. Although the substance of the water did not change, it was still water. It was still H2O. As the water merely stood like a wall, unlike the water that turned to blood, where the actual substance of the water changed and its substance became blood. But when it came to the splitting of the sea, although its substance didn't change, right over here, its nature changed. The nature of the water was literally transformed to an opposite nature. What's the normative nature of water? Free-flowing. And what was its new nature at the time of the splitting of the sea? Rigid like a wall. Since when does water stand up on its own? If you put it in a cup, right, you put it in a container, it can't go anywhere, it's stuck. But if you tear down the artificial walls, the water will collapse, always. By the splitting of the sea, it stood up like a wall. So although it remained water, it didn't turn into a physical wall. It didn't transform into wall. It didn't. So although it remained water, H2O, the nature of that water transformed utterly, so that it took on the properties of a solid even while remaining water. In other words, in that vicinity, the water became solid. Let's continue inside. These changes not only involve the substances of these beings, which change from one substance to another and from one nature to another. This change involved the divine energy that creates the being, as in the saying, he who tells oil to burn will tell vinegar to burn. And this is what we're going to end with this insight. That when we talk about a transformation of a staff to a snake, of water to blood, or as free-flowing water to rigid water, when we talk about a substantive change, it's always coming on the heels of an energy change. Every miracle starts at the top, on the energy level, on the spiritual level. The spiritual energy of that thing first had to change on a cosmic level to then affect it on a materialistic level. The staff does not change into a snake unless and until on an energy level its divine coding changed. I don't want to get too deep into this because this is a topic that we're going to explore at the top of next week's session. But everything, and many of you have explored this with me in previous sessions, in previous classes, in person, and other discourses, other mystical classes, everything in existence is coded. It's divinely encoded. It has letters of code. Kabbalah teaches, way before computer programming, Kabbalah taught that everything in existence has lines of code behind it. Hebrew letter code. And if you want to create a change, for any change to happen, you have to start with the code. What he's saying here is, every miracle that happened with the Exodus, whether it's the staff turning into a snake, or whether it is the water turning into blood, or whether it is the water standing like a wall, it didn't just happen on the ground. It happened first up in the letters. The coding changed, and then that changed it on the earth, on the ground here below. And so what he's getting at with all of this is to say that in truth, the Exodus was a pretty big deal, and the miracles of the Exodus is a pretty big deal. So when God introduces himself as the one who took us out of Egypt, it's no small potatoes. It's a big deal. That Exodus business that came on the heels of all those miracles, that's a pretty big deal. And yet, by the end of this paragraph, we're going to see that despite how great the Exodus was, creation of heaven and earth is still greater. And God still should have introduced himself, by all accounts, with that description. So we're right in the middle of chapter 2, which is right where we want to be. Maybe. So we're going to put it on hold. We'll reset for next week. I'll reset it next week at the top of the class. And we're going to jump into discussion about oil and vinegar and why it is that oil can burn something. In other words, if you put a wick in oil, it burns, and why vinegar, it doesn't work. If you want to find out why the nature of oil is different than the nature of vinegar, join me next time, in which we'll also talk about the nature of Exodus versus creation, the nature of Abraham versus Rabbi Akiva, and the nature of the divine attribute of Malchut versus the other 6 emotive sfirot. So join me for this and more next week, same bat time, same bat channel, 7:30 Maamar Mondays, not 8 as I said this morning erroneously, 7:30 Maamar Mondays. Be there or be square. Why am I saying that often? Okay, join us for that, and it's going to be awesome to see you all there. Any questions before we close out? Anyone have a question? Feel free. Questions? Comments? Suggestions? All right, good. We'll see you all next week. Thank you for joining me. Oh, just so you know, thank you, Sandrine. Just so you know, tomorrow, every day, Monday through Friday, we do Power Parsha, Daily Power Parsha, 15 minutes to give you a jolt during the day. Take a lunch break with me, 12 to 12:15. Look for the Zoom links on intownjewishacademy.org/live. It has all of the schedule. On Tuesday, tomorrow night, 8 p.m., this time it's 8 p.m. Tuesdays, we have Talmud Tuesdays. So study the Talmud with me tomorrow night. I have the text up on the screen. Wednesday is going to be our Passover boot camp. Thursday night, we're cooking in the kitchen again. This is nonstop action. So glad that you're with me. Great to see you all tonight. Laila Tov, and be healthy. Good health to everybody and everyone's families. Only good news. All right. Bye. Great to see you all.